Hi, I'm Scott McLean from transmusicmastery.com, and in this video I'm going to give a brief overview of the Massive VST. And if we just start off here, I've got Massive loaded in a project. I've got the signal analyzer up and just one track here with Massive on it. In fact, I can delete MIDI clip that was from a different thing. So let's go back to here. And so right now I've said File, New Sound, and that's given me basically what amounts to an initialized preset or a nip patch. And if I play a note, okay, we see that it is a saw wave. And it's probably useful to just zoom in here for a moment and look at how it might compare to what we've been seeing throughout the course. You notice a slight curvature to the ramp, so it's not completely linear. And then here we have the harmonics. So Massive can look fairly intimidating. It's a big user interface, and there's a lot of different knobs and stuff. But once you get to know it, it's fairly straightforward. The main thing we want to look at in this video is come to grips with how do we work with the oscillators, how do we work with the filters, how does the routing work, and how do we do modulations. Those are the basic core tasks that we need to perform anytime we're dealing with a synthesizer. So that should be the first thing that we look at. After that, it's just a matter of looking at the manual and understanding the various special features that the synth may support and experimenting. So first and foremost, let me give you a basic overview. The oscillators are located here. There are 3 oscillators. Oscillator 1, 2, and 3. There's also this modulation oscillator, which allows us to modulate various parameters of a oscillator, any one of these 3 oscillators, such as ring modulation, phase. If I wanted to modulate the phase of oscillator 1, I would use this modulation oscillator. And some other things here as well, the phase position as well as, or the wavetable position, and the filter frequency modulation. But I'm not really going to use that too much in this series of videos, so we can ignore it for now. There's also a noise generation module. This allows us to generate various colors of noise, white noise, bright noise, brown noise, and so forth. There's some pretty interesting noise effects here, like murmur. It's like a crowd background noise. Pretty neat. Okay, so that's the noise generators, okay, or the sound generators that come with Massive. Basically 3 oscillators and a noise module. Now, I want to draw your attention to this routing window over here. And this, in effect, is the signal flow diagram for Massive. So this tells us how the signals flow through the synthesizer. And it should be read from left to right. So the signal is going to flow from left to right generally. The oscillators, OSC 1, 2, and 3, are depicted in this diagram here, and followed by the noise generator. And there's this feedback module that's represented here. The controls for that are right here. And that allows us to take some feedback from different points in the synthesizer and feed that back in. So for example, if I wanted to pull feedback from here, these FB boxes indicate where we tap into the feedback point. Okay. Now, each module, if we look at oscillator 1, all right, the first thing we encounter is this B button here. These are buttons like INS1, insert 1, insert 2, and I'll explain those in a moment. There's some buttons you can control, so there's some flexibility to the signal routing, and one of the things that's flexible is this bypass, this B button. This stands for bypass, and that allows us to bypass, if we want to, the rest of the synthesizer filters, effects, the amplifier. And say we wanted to have the output of oscillator 1 bypass the filters, go directly to the output All right. Well, that's what this B button is for. So if you follow this yellow line, it's indicating that oscillator 1 is bypassing the synth, and the output's going to travel along this line. And then we can tap into 3 different points where we can have that bypass feed into the signal flow. It could go into effects 1 if I select this button here. Effects 1 is up here. Okay, this is where we would select different effects like reverb, delay, that type of thing. Or I could have it go into effects 2, which is right here. Same thing, reverb, chorus, phaser. Or I could have it go into the EQ, which is right here. So that's the 3 options when you're dealing with the bypass. And the bypass has its own independent fader to control the level of the bypass. So for example, right now I'm bypassing, oscillator 1 is going to bypass the filter and go right into the EQ module and then to the master output. The level of the bypass is controlled here. So how much of the bypass signal is fed into the point where it's entering the signal flow. And here it would be the EQ. That's controlled by this fader. And then you can turn the bypass on or off completely using this button here. Okay, so for now, let's go ahead and I'm going to disable the bypass. So now let's trace the signal flow from oscillator 1 as it goes through the synth. Okay, I just turned off insert 1. So the first thing we hit is this X. So what is this X? Well, that X represents this fader right here, which allows us to route the signal between filter 1 or filter 2, or a mix of both filter 1 and filter 2. All right. So when it's halfway, it's sending equal signal to filter 1 and through this line into filter 2. All right. That's all that does. So right now, oscillator 1 is flowing into filter 1 and 2. Now filter 1, well actually before it gets to filter 1, there's an option here for having an insert. And this is insert 1 or insert 2. So if I wanted to, just to show you what these are, I can only use one or the other on this particular location. But I could add an effect using insert 1, and that's located down here. So if I select, like I could have a simple delay or a bit crusher, frequency shifter. Let's try that, frequency shifter. I'm going to play a note. I'm just going to hold C down. Let me unfreeze this. Okay, so what's happening is the signal's flowing through here, it's entering the insert, and then it flows into the filter. All right? And there's an equal amount going through filter 2. So filter 1, I'm going to set that to a low pass 4. There's different filter types. So we've got low pass 4, low pass 2. The 4 is an indicator of the number of poles. So this is a 4-pole filter, a 2-pole filter. Also all pass, double notch, band pass, and so forth. Different types of filters. So now if we play a note at this point, we can hear the filter having an effect on the signal. Now I could also place that insert before or after the filter. Right now it's before, which is this frequency shifter. If I wanted to, I could put it here just by clicking that. Okay, and the FB, that's the feedback. I talked about that earlier. Then there's this signal here which goes into filter 2. Now this is controlled by this X, which represents this fader here. This is the serial or parallel routing to control how the signals are routed through the filters. In parallel mode, we could have the signal flowing through both filter 1 and filter 2, and then it'll get combined over here. In serial mode, when I move this all the way to the top, filter 1's output is going to be routed into filter 2's input. Okay, and then the output of filter 2 is going to be sent down this line and then routed to the amplifier and panning, and then through the effects into the master output. Now, these X's here represent the output control, an output fader on each of the filters, and that fader is right here. Okay, so with this fader down, we're not going to hear any output from filter 2. And right now we have it in serial mode, so the signal is going to flow through filter 1 into filter 2, then it's going to hit this fader, which is all the way down. So I would expect with the current routing not to hear anything. And of course I do hear something. And the reason for that is because of this mix control here, which is this fader here, which actually allows us to mix output from 1 and 2. So what I'm actually hearing is it's all the way up, which indicates that it's only allowing the filter 1 output to flow through. If I brought this down halfway, I'd be getting both filter 1 and filter 2 output. If I turn this fader down, this is the fader for filter 1. Okay, we don't hear anything. So even with this up, because of this mix fader, there's still some filter 1 being allowed to flow through. I'm going to bring this all the way down. So this is something to know when you're trying to set up serial routing of your filters in Massive. You need to set this all the way to the top and this mix all the way to the bottom. That way you're only getting the output from filter 2. And then now if I bring this fader up, I'll actually hear something. Okay, so now the flow is through here, and now we have another insert opportunity. We could use an insert 2 here. We could put an insert pretty much anywhere. We could have it before each filter, after each filter, in between filter 1 and filter 2 if we're doing a serial routing, on the combined mix of the filters, and then in the feedback loop. So that's the possible insert locations. Then it hits the amplifier panning, which is this module here, and then it flows through FX1, FX2, and then the EQ, and then to the master output, which is controlled by this knob. And I think I just covered all of the routing for Massive. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of the signal flow, let's look at how we select oscillators. We work with waveforms in Massive. If I select this down arrow right here, this allows me to select a wavetable. So Massive has various wavetables. Each wavetable has a set of waves that we can select from. And for example, right now it's set to square-sol1. If I wanted to, we could try the strontium wave, see what that's like. In fact, let me get rid of this insert and let me clear the filter. So within the wavetable, there's a wavetable position. This lets us select which wave we want. And then an intensity. Okay, let's try another wavetable. Let's try additive mix 5. Okay, so there's a number of wavetables here. Let's try this acid one. And screamer. About kangaroo. And then, let's see, modern talking. So you get the idea. Now the basic waves, if we look at these, we've got square saw, and then square saw 2, smooth square, sine square, sine triangle, polysaw, polysaw 2, so a complement of different wavetables with different waveforms, and then the pulse saw, pulse width modulation. And then if for this one, if you use it on pulse, then you need to vary the pulse width. And pulse saw sync. So you get the idea. So that's how you work with the waves. Now, there's no, at least that I can find, there's not a way to invert a waveform. Okay, so if you wanted to invert the wave like you can with Silent 1, there does not appear to be that capability within Massive. Now, setting the phase start position, that's controlled on this oscillator tab, and we can do that with this section here, oscillator phases. So we would restart via gate, and then we would just select which part, what phase we want that oscillator to start at. So we could control each oscillator independently here. And then to tune it, use the pitch control here. And then to modulate the amplifier envelope, it's already configured for that, and that's one feature on Massive that I need to explain. Each one of these boxes is basically a modulation slot, and that allows us to hook up modulators to that particular control. Okay, we can have, in most cases, we can have up to 2 modulation sources indicated by these dashes right there, and then this other input is a sidechain input, which further acts on the modulation sources. But the easiest example to show you to start with is what's already configured on the amplifier modulation, and that's 4. That number indicates which one of these numbers, and the color is your clue to understand which one of these modulators is acting on that control. So in this case, it's 4, it's envelope 4. So if I click on envelope 4, now I see the envelope curve for envelope number 4. And that has been assigned to modulate the amplifier volume, basically. Now, if I wanted to modulate the amplifier pitch, I could select envelope 1, and I could click on this crosshair arrows icon, just click on that and drag over here and drop that in, and now envelope 1 is modulating the pitch. This is the modulation amount here, so if I wanted to, let's modulate it over a 12 semitone range, and let's just press the button and see what happens. So we can hear it hit that maximum pitch and then decay down to the sustain level. And then if I extend the release, in fact, I need to extend the release on envelope 4, which is modulating the amp envelope. Now I can shorten the release on envelope 1, which will have the pitch decay faster. So one thing to keep in mind is this is the decay, and this point right here is the level at which it will sustain until the note is released. When the note is released, it will then follow this curve. So this would be the release portion of the envelope. And then there's a possibility for looping and doing a little bit more complex or sophisticated envelope treatment with this section here. So there are 4 envelopes that you can use as modulators, LFOs. So if I wanted to, I could use an LFO, drag and drop this over here to modulate the pitch. And you use the same technique to assign modulation sources to any target based on these modulation slots below each control. The other thing you can do is with the LFOs, these 4 actually, they're configurable as to the type of modulator. You could have an LFO. If I select this, I can select from LFO, performer, or stepper. Performer is kind of like a multi-stage envelope generator like we saw in Zebra 2. Can have different curve type. So if, let's say, I take performer and use it to modulate the pitch. In fact, I already had set that up. So if we play it now, each step in the performer is following this envelope curve. I can change that curve by clicking the load curve, and this gives me different curves that I can use to configure a step. So the way you do it is you click on the curve you want, and then you click on the step that you want to put that curve into. So something like this. And then we can vary the loop by dragging here, clicking and dragging. So now this is a 3-step loop. And it doesn't quite indicate where it is in the envelope, but you can tell if let's do a ramp up actually here. So it'll go down, then up, and then it'll go down and up a few times. And then you can randomize it. You can randomize the levels. You can randomize the curve. So you get the idea. The other thing you can do, it has a step sequencer. This is a little different. This allows us to basically apply a certain amount of modulation between 0 and 12 to any modulation target that we want to pick. So for this guy, be up 12. Basically, it's 12 would represent 100% of whatever this amount is. Let me start the loop point here. So alternating octaves, and then I could have a 4-step loop, have the rate, sync the rate to tempo, so let's make it 1/8. Or I could bring this down to a different pitch level. Something like that. So that's how you would use that. And routing is the key to understanding it. The voicing, you'll see me demonstrate a lot of this in the videos, because we need to widen the detune amount and the wave stacking, and you'll see me demonstrate this in the sound design videos. But the basic idea is that to increase the number of waves generated by the oscillators, we need to increase this unisono amount. So if I wanted to say 11, turn this down. And then to detune that amount, we can use this unisono spread, which will spread these voices out. And so forth. Then for stereo widening, we can do this. Okay, and that's really about it. So I've covered the oscillators, I've covered how to work with the filters, how to do the routing with the filters, the signal flow, and modulators. And that's really the basics and should get you a long way using the synthesizer. I'll see you in the next video.